The billionaire's son stood frozen in the middle of a crowded charity gala. The same man who once mocked a poor janitor's daughter now knelt before her, his voice breaking as he said, "I was wrong. Please forgive me." The guests gasped. No one could believe what they were seeing. Years ago, he'd laughed at her torn shoes and dirty hands, calling her worthless. But now his eyes were filled with regret, not pride. The golden heir who once lived above everyone was on his knees, begging the very girl he had humiliated in front of the world. How did a man born with everything end up desperate for forgiveness from the one person he once destroyed? Ethan Cole was born into a life most people could only dream of. His father, Richard Cole, was a billionaire CEO, owner of one of the biggest tech companies in New York. Their mansion stood on a private hill, where luxury cars lined the driveway and servants bowed at every step. Ethan attended the most prestigious private school in the city, a place where success was measured not by grades, but by how much your family owned. He was admired, envied, and feared by many. But beneath the polished smile and expensive uniform, Ethan had inherited his father's arrogance. He was taught that kindness was weakness and that people without wealth were invisible. On the other side of the city lived Lily Brooks, a quiet, hard-working girl. Her father, Daniel Brooks, was the janitor at the same elite school Ethan attended. Their small apartment was far from the shining lights of Manhattan, the walls thin, the air cold, and the future uncertain. But Lily never complained. She dreamed of becoming an architect, sketching buildings on the back of old receipts her father brought home from work. Each morning before classes began, she helped her father sweep the empty hallways of the school. Her backpack hung beside a mop bucket, her books resting on a janitor's cart. When Ethan first noticed her, it wasn't because of her talent, it was because of laughter. His friends mocked the way she dressed, the way she spoke, the way she stayed after school cleaning. And one afternoon, in front of everyone, Ethan did something cruel. He snatched one of her drawings, held it high, and tore it in half. "Maybe stick to cleaning floors," he said with a smirk. "You're not meant to build anything." Laughter filled the hallway. Lily stood there, her eyes wide, trying to hold back tears. Her father came running, his old boots squeaking against the floor. He didn't say a word to Ethan, only picked up the torn paper and whispered, "Let's go, sweetheart." That night, Daniel worked a double shift. He pushed through exhaustion just to make rent and pay for Lily's art supplies. But near dawn, his body gave in. He collapsed in the empty corridor of the school, alone and unseen. By the time Lily found him, it was too late. She never returned to that school again. Years passed. Ethan graduated, went on to join his father's empire, and forgot all about the girl whose dream he had crushed. Success came easily. Fame, money, influence. But the emptiness inside him grew heavier with every award, every handshake, every headline that called him the next great leader. Then, one afternoon, while reviewing applicants for a major urban project, Ethan paused. The name on one of the proposals made his heart skip a beat. Lily Brooks, lead architect. His hands froze. The past he buried was standing right in front of his future. Ethan stared at the proposal for several minutes, unable to move. The name, the handwriting on the design sketches, it was her, the janitor's daughter, the girl he had mocked, the one whose dreams he had ripped apart in a crowded hallway years ago. The project was a charity initiative, a community housing plan meant to give low-income families affordable homes. Ironically, it was everything his father's company had avoided for years. And the lead architect? Lily Brooks. Ethan told himself it couldn't be the same person, but curiosity clawed at him. He ordered his assistant to schedule a meeting. 2 days later, inside a modest community office, she walked in. The moment she appeared, Ethan's confidence cracked. She was no longer the timid girl he remembered. Her posture was strong, her eyes steady, her voice calm. Time had changed her, but something in her face, the quiet kindness, the gentleness, was still there. "Mr. Cole," she said, extending her hand politely, "it's an honor to finally meet you. I've heard your company might partner with us." Ethan took her hand, guilt hitting like a wave. "Yes," he replied softly. "We're exploring options." For the rest of the meeting, he could barely focus. She spoke passionately about the design, how each home would have sunlight, open space, and dignity. The same dream she once sketched on scraps of paper. He realized she had built her life from the same pain he had caused. When the meeting ended, she thanked him and left with a warm but distant smile. Ethan sat there speechless. For the first time in years, he felt small. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her standing under the fluorescent school lights, holding her torn drawing. Every cruel laugh echoed back. He had everything, yet somehow she had become the kind of person he always wanted to be. The next day, he visited the construction site without notice. Workers respected Lily. They called her fair, humble, and brilliant. She treated everyone, engineers, janitors, security guards, with the same kindness. Ethan stood there, watching quietly, but not everyone welcomed him. One of the senior project managers whispered, "That's Cole's son, the billionaire's kid. Why's he here?" Probably wants credit for her work. He overheard it, and for the first time, he didn't defend himself. He knew they had every reason to hate what his name stood for. Before he left, Lily approached him. "You didn't tell me you were that Ethan Cole," she said calmly. Her voice carried neither anger nor forgiveness. Ethan swallowed hard. "I thought you wouldn't want to work with me if you knew." She looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "You're right." He froze. Her eyes glistened for just a second before she turned away, leaving him standing among half-built walls and unfinished dreams. As she walked off into the evening light, a chilling realization sank into him. Lily Brooks wasn't someone he could simply apologize to. He'd have to earn forgiveness from the woman who had every reason to never give it. Ethan couldn't shake the image of Lily's face, the calm, distant look of someone who no longer held hate, but something far heavier, indifference. That night, he sat in his office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the city lights glowing beneath him, but he felt nothing. All his life he had been admired, feared, and envied. Yet the one person whose opinion mattered most now saw straight through him. Days turned into weeks as they continued working on the project. Ethan attended every site visit, showing up early and staying late. He offered to handle the funding personally, but Lily refused. "This isn't charity, Mr. Cole," she said firmly. "We built this with effort, not pity." He admired her strength, but knew it came from years of pain. Still, he didn't walk away. For once, he wanted to do something right, not for headlines, not for his father's legacy, but for her. As the project neared its deadline, challenges began piling up. The city's permit was delayed, supplies were short, and investors threatened to pull out. The pressure was immense. When Ethan offered to use his connections to fix it, the board of trustees hesitated. One of them, a cynical old man, said, "We all know who his father is. The last thing we need is another Cole trying to control this foundation." Ethan stayed silent, accepting the humiliation. But Lily saw the look in his eyes. He wasn't angry. He was ashamed. For the first time, she wondered if the arrogant boy she remembered was finally gone. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Lily found Ethan sitting alone on a half-built staircase, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands. He looked nothing like a billionaire's son. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. He glanced up. "Because I owe you more than words can pay." Lily hesitated. "You can't erase the past." "I know," he said. "But I can stop being the man who caused it." There was silence between them, heavy but not cold. She sat beside him, unsure why. Maybe it was pity, or maybe something deeper. She could see in his eyes the truth of his emotional journey, the exhaustion of a man trying to rebuild a soul he had once destroyed. Before either of them could say more, a worker ran toward them, panicked. "Miss Brooks." The scaffolding on the north wing collapsed. "2 workers are trapped under." They both sprinted across the site, dust and shouts filling the air. Ethan didn't hesitate. He dove into the debris, helping lift the fallen beams with his bare hands. "Ethan, stop! It's not safe," Lily cried. He ignored her, coughing from the dust, voice breaking. I won't let anyone else get hurt because of me." Minutes later, the workers were pulled out alive, but Ethan collapsed, gasping for breath, covered in blood and dust. Lily knelt beside him, heart pounding. As the ambulance sirens echoed closer, he looked up at her through the haze and whispered, "Now you know what I was really running from." Her eyes widened. "Running from what?" Ethan's hand trembled, clutching hers. "My father's truth." And before she could ask another word, his eyes closed, leaving her in stunned silence, caught between anger, fear, and the terrifying thought that she might finally be losing him. Rain poured over the hospital windows as Lily waited outside the emergency room, her hands trembling, her mind in chaos. She had seen Ethan rush into the debris without hesitation, risking his life for others. That wasn't the arrogant boy she remembered. That was someone completely changed. Yet his last words echoed inside her head. "My father's truth." Hours later, a doctor walked out. "He's stable," he said, "but he needs rest." His body took a heavy hit. When Lily stepped into the room, Ethan was pale, his arm bandaged, his eyes half open. He gave a weak smile. "You stayed," he murmured. "You scared everyone," she replied softly. "Why would you do something so reckless?" He turned his face toward the ceiling, voice faint. "Because I'm tired of pretending I'm someone I'm not. You were right that day. I can't erase what I did, but maybe I can prove I'm not my father." Lily frowned. "What does your father have to do with this?" Ethan sighed deeply. "The scandal that destroyed my company. It wasn't just numbers. My father built his empire by crushing people like your father. He underpaid workers, fired families, forced janitors to work without overtime. I found out years ago and stayed silent. I was part of it." Lily's breath caught. "You knew?" His eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I was the billionaire's son who had everything except courage. When I mocked you, I was mocking the guilt I carried for what my family had done. I hated myself, but it was easier to hate you." The room fell silent. The beeping of the monitor was the only sound between them. Lily looked down, trying to process the confession. She remembered her father coming home exhausted, hands bleeding from work, never once complaining. He used to tell her, "Not all rich people are cruel. Lily, some just forget what kindness looks like." Now, standing beside the man who once tore her dreams apart, she felt something she hadn't expected. Pity. Before she could speak, the door burst open. Richard Cole, Ethan's father, stormed in, his tailored suit soaked from the rain. His expression was cold, but his voice was sharp. "What have you done, Ethan? Do you have any idea what this stunt has cost us?" Lily froze, seeing the resemblance. The same piercing eyes, the same pride. Ethan sat up slowly, pain etched across his face. "You mean what it cost you, father?" "I'm done living your way." Richard's tone turned venomous. "You're still my son. You carry my name. You'll clean this mess, or you'll be left with nothing." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then I'll take nothing." The words hit Richard like a slap. He glared at Lily. "This is her influence, isn't it? The janitor's girl who made my son weak." Lily's voice rose, firm and unwavering. "No, Mr. Cole. He's finally strong enough to stand for something real." Richard's expression hardened, and he turned toward the door. "Then you've made your choice, Ethan. By tomorrow, you're no longer part of this family." Ethan's face went pale, but his voice didn't shake. "Maybe losing you is how I finally find myself." Richard hesitated, then walked out, slamming the door behind him. Lily stood speechless. Ethan leaned back, breathing unevenly, eyes filled with quiet fire. "He won't stop, Lily. My father will destroy the foundation before dawn." She stepped closer, whispering, "Then we'll stop him." But outside the hospital, under the storm, a black car waited, and inside, Richard Cole made a phone call that would change everything before sunrise. By dawn, word had spread that the Cole Corporation had pulled its funding from Lily's foundation project. Construction stopped, workers were sent home, and reporters gathered at the site gates. The community Ethan had fought to protect was collapsing, not because of a storm, but because of one man's revenge. Lily arrived at the office early, her heart pounding with anger and disbelief. Ethan followed shortly after, moving slower from his injuries, but determined. "He's behind this," Ethan said, voice low. "My father won't stop until he ruins everything that reminds him of me." Lily faced him, tears of frustration in her eyes. "Then fight back, Ethan. You can't let him destroy the one thing that finally means something." He looked at her for a long moment, realizing she believed in him more than he believed in himself. "If I lose him," he said quietly, "I lose everything my last name ever stood for." She stepped closer. "Then build a new name, one built on kindness and truth, not fear." That was the moment Ethan decided to act. Hours later, a press conference was called at the project site. Dozens of reporters waited, expecting a statement from Richard Cole, the billionaire CEO who had just withdrawn his funding. But instead, Ethan walked onto the stage, arms still wrapped in bandages, eyes burning with determination. He stood before the microphones and began, "For years I lived under my father's shadow, pretending his way was right, that money and status were all that mattered. But I was wrong," the crowd murmured. He continued, voice rising with emotion. "This foundation was never about wealth. It's about giving dignity to people who've been overlooked, like the janitor who worked nights cleaning my school, and his daughter who taught me what humanity looks like." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lily froze where she stood at the edge, her heart tightening as he spoke her truth before the world. "I destroyed her dream once," Ethan said, "and she still chose forgiveness over hate. If you want to know what real success looks like, look at her." The moment hung heavy in the air. And then, in the distance, a car door slammed. Richard Cole strode forward, face red with fury. "This ends now," he shouted. "You've humiliated our family long enough." Ethan didn't back down. "No, father, you've humiliated yourself. The world doesn't fear you anymore." The reporters turned their microphones toward Richard, who shouted about betrayal, about bloodlines, about power. But his voice shook, his mask cracking for all to see, and then Ethan delivered the words that silenced everyone. "I would rather be the son of a janitor than the heir of a man without a heart." The crowd erupted, reporters snapping questions, workers cheering, people shouting Ethan's name. Richard stood frozen, realizing his empire was crumbling not by scandal, but by truth, as security escorted Richard away. Lily stepped beside Ethan. He looked exhausted but at peace. She whispered, "You just lost everything." He smiled faintly. "No, Lily, I just found the part of me that money could never buy." But before they could leave the stage, a breaking alert flashed on a nearby monitor. "Cole Corporation under investigation for fraud and labor violations." Lily's eyes widened. "He's going to take you down with him." Ethan exhaled slowly, looking toward the crowd gathering closer. "Then we'll face it together." Thunder rumbled above the half-built homes. The rain started again, washing over the ruins of pride and the beginning of something new. And as the storm grew louder, one question hung in the air. Would the truth set them free, or destroy them both? The storm that had shaken the city slowly faded, but its echoes remained in the headlines for weeks. The Cole family's empire, once untouchable, was under investigation for decades of fraud, abuse, and corruption. The billionaire CEO, Richard Cole, was exposed, his empire crumbling piece by piece. Through it all, Ethan didn't run. He faced every hearing, every public question, every headline with calm acceptance. The media painted him as the billionaire's son who turned against his father, but Ethan didn't care. For the first time, he was living a truth that didn't need defending. Lily stood by him quietly, though she never sought attention. Her foundation, which had nearly fallen apart, suddenly found overwhelming support from across the country. Donations flooded in from people moved by Ethan's courage and Lily's compassion. The project that began as a dream of hope finally had the strength to continue, not because of money, but because of belief. Months later, the court verdict came. Richard Cole was found guilty of corporate fraud, labor exploitation, and obstruction of justice. His company was dismantled, its assets distributed to repay the workers he had wronged. The judgment was fair, but it carried a heavy cost. Ethan watched from the back of the courtroom, emotionless at first. But when the sentence was read, his eyes filled with quiet pain. No son wants to see his father fall, no matter how deserved it is. Afterward, Lily found him standing outside the courthouse, dressed simply, hands in his pockets, looking at the city skyline. "It's over," she said softly. He nodded. "No, it's finally beginning." For a long moment they stood in silence. Then Ethan turned to her and said, "When I tore your drawing years ago, I thought I'd erased a dream. But all I did was destroy my own humanity. You built something I couldn't, something real." Lily smiled faintly. "I didn't build it alone. People only rise when someone helps them stand again." He looked down, humbled. "You had every reason to hate me." "I did," she admitted, her tone gentle. "But hate keeps us in the past. Forgiveness moves us forward." Those words stayed with him. A year later, a new building stood where the Foundation's first project had begun, a housing complex named the Brooks Center for Hope. Its courtyard held a small statue, a broom and a blueprint crossing each other, symbolizing dignity in every kind of work. Ethan didn't attend the unveiling as a VIP. He stood quietly among the crowd, just another man among those he once looked down upon. Children played near the fountain. Families moved into their new homes, and laughter filled the air, the kind of sound that money could never buy. When Lily approached him, she held something wrapped in paper. "I think this belongs to you," she said. He opened it carefully. It was her old torn drawing, restored, framed beautifully, the one he had ripped apart all those years ago. "I found it in the archives," she said with a small smile. "I thought you'd want to keep it." Ethan's eyes glistened. "No," he whispered. "This belongs here. It started all of this." He handed it back, his hand shaking slightly. "Keep it as proof that we both changed," she nodded, placing it on the wall inside the center's lobby, right where everyone could see. As the evening sun lit up the golden letters above the entrance, Ethan turned to her one last time. "You gave me something my world never taught me, a kindness. It's more powerful than every dollar I've ever had." Lily smiled, eyes filled with quiet peace. "Then make sure you never forget what it cost to learn it." He looked at her, humbled. "I never will." The story of the billionaire's son and the janitor's daughter spread across the nation as a tale of redemption and grace. It wasn't about wealth or punishment. It was about transformation. And years later, whenever people passed the Brooks Center for Hope, they would see that framed sketch and read the plaque beneath it. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It builds a future where kindness wins. Ethan Cole's legacy was no longer written in luxury towers or gold signatures. It was written in brick, compassion and humility, the kind that made a once-lost billionaire's son truly rich.